Lee in 1906 gave the SCV our marching orders and what we know was in charge when he said, "To you, sons of Confederate veterans, we will submit the vindication of the cause for which we fought. Your strength will be given the defense of the Confederate soldier's good name, the guardianship of his history, emulation of his virtues, perpetuation of those principles which he loved and which made him glorious and which we all cherish." Thank you. Today we're very privileged to have just a fantastic man here. Sam has been very gracious and accepted our invitation without hesitation when I contacted him. He said, "Absolutely, I'll do it." And so we are very honored to have him here. Did anybody drive more than 5 hours to be here in the room? Okay. I didn't want you to raise your hand yet, but anyway, Sam drove.
We're in a church. We got to be honest.
Exactly. So he was very kind enough to accept our invitation to be here today, and I just want to tell you a little bit about him real quick. Sam is a graduate of the Kentucky Military Institute. He has a degree from Marshall University. And he is a veteran of service, honorable service in the United States Marine Corps. You notice I hesitated to wait to see if anybody would respond. He is a collateral descendant of General John Bell Hood. He's a retired construction company owner, and he's been a member of the board of directors of the Blue-Gray Education Society in Virginia, and is past president of the board of directors of Confederate Memorial Hall Museum in New Orleans. Sam resides in his hometown of Huntington, West Virginia, and he has a second hometown, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. That's a pretty good second one to have, I would imagine, with his wife of 35 years, Miss Martha. And he is the proud father of two sons, Derek Hood of Lexington, Kentucky, and Taylor Hood of Barbersville, West Virginia. So with no further ado, let's give a warm Georgia welcome to Mr. Sam Hood. I was telling somebody I've been to Saudi Arabia, I've been to the Falkland Islands, I've been to Russia, I've been to Machu Picchu in Peru, but I've never been to Milledgeville, Georgia. And I'll tell you something, I'd rather live here than any of those other places. So, I love the small southern cities and towns. You know, they're kind of going away, and they build the shopping centers and the strip malls on the bypasses, and the center parts of the towns kind of dry up. But it's really cool. I come to some of these smaller cities and towns, and I feel like I'm an extra in Driving Miss Daisy or something. So it's great. And the other thing is I travel around giving talks on Civil War history, and living in West Virginia, literally right on the border. I can see the Ohio River from our home, so I spend about half the time speaking up north and half the time down. I feel like this is a home game. So, and the other thing is, I'm from West Virginia, and everybody can understand me when I come south. I went to Youngstown, Ohio, and they thought about putting subtitles along. So anyway, but I enjoy it. And by the way, my wife and I, we have relocated to Myrtle Beach. So we lived in Huntington for 65 years, but we're in Myrtle now. So I don't know that I would have been able to do this if we were living in Huntington, because it'd be like a 10-hour drive. So anyway, the other thing, I kind of keep a little log of the talks and the presentations I give, and this is number 77 for me. That's the good news. The bad news, it's number 2 on this. So be nice to me if I stumble around. No, and before I go through this, and I'm going to go through it quickly. It's normally for Civil War roundtables, and it's like a 45-minute thing, and we don't have that much time, so I'm going to go through it really quickly. But I want to take a few minutes and just say a couple of things about what I usually talk about in the 75 first talks that I gave. It's hard for me to get in front of a group of Civil War history, people that are interested in Civil War history, either in a descendants organization or even in a roundtable, without talking about General John Bell Hood, who is hands down the most unfairly maligned character in Civil War history. If you read, well, and I've written 2 books on Hood, so when I say if you read stuff right after the war, all the way up through like 1970, or 1990, John Bell Hood was this, professional soldier, and he lost use of his left arm at Gettysburg and lost his right leg at Chickamauga. And heck, if I'd lost my pinky, I'd have wanted to go home, and he kept fighting. And then some guy writes this book in the early 1990s, and it turns him into a drug addict and all of this outrageous stuff. Well, so I decided I'd had enough of it after a while, and I wrote my book. And I also give presentations on Hood, and I can't get in front of 150 people without saying, what you've read ain't so. And and I've got it all outlined in my book, and also tell people I don't say this sort of stuff just to sell books. And I prove it by saying if there's anybody who can't afford a book, I'd give them one. So I'm not in it for the money. So, but anyway, I like to give a plug to General Hood. A couple of things. One is I decided to write a book, and I don't know if any of you all have written a book, but if you're realistic, you figure, well, you're just going to have to publish it yourself because there's no way a publisher could be interested in anything. I mean, I graduated with a C average from Marshall University. I mean, I'm no rocket scientist. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to have to publish it myself, and sent it out to a couple of publishers, and darn if a real live publisher didn't want it. And so that kind of blew my mind, and then so it was published, and the very first words, the first sentence in the introduction of my book says, "It's a shame a book like this has to be written." And when you start off a book with that, and you find a publisher, here's a publisher that wants to publish my book that says it shouldn't even have to be written. Well, not only did I find a publisher, but just to illustrate the sad shape of Civil War history, Civil War scholarship, Civil War publishing, Civil War, I would say Civil War Hollywood and TV. They don't even do it anymore, and thank goodness, because no telling what they project. But anyway, not a book starts out by saying that, and I won 2 Civil War History Book of the Year awards. I mean, so somebody gives you a book, this book shouldn't even have to be written. So that is not an illustration of the quality of my book. It is more of an illustration on the quality of all the books that and the authors that I call out and that I give specific primary source information on. But it's really hard once you get an image. And with me, up until the last couple of years, it's been John Bell Hood. It's really hard to fight an image when the image is controlled by just popular opinion. And now we're all in the same boat, aren't we? Remember when the Confederacy was just the Confederacy and the battle flag was the Confederate battle flag. Now, now it's, who knows what. And our ancestors who fought, were men and a few women who dedicated themselves to defending their homes and trying to win their independence as their grandfathers had. But now you see this image of what they were. And all of these, these unpleasant, unflattering words, traitors and on and on. So we're all I think we can all kind of relate now as to how do you kind of try to hold back the tide. So anyway, like I said, I usually, I get in front of people and I usually have to give a plug for General Hood. But and that was originally going to be when Scott, where Scott disappeared to, there he is. I was going to give a presentation on General John Bell Hood, but then as things started happening over the last several months with monuments coming down and, being vandalized. Confederate Memorial Hall in New Orleans, which you mentioned I've been involved with for many, many years, got firebombed here about, several months ago. I was speaking at Beauvoir. I just happened to be in the quote-unquote neighborhood. Beauvoir is only, hour and a half from New Orleans, and my cell phone rings, and they got firebombed. So the statues are coming down, and they're being defaced, and, paint thrown on them, so it's a whole different world out there. And so when I told Scott that I was doing research on another book, I wrote my first book and I said, oh my God, just one and done, never again. Then I wrote the second one and I said, 2, that's it, no more. This is number 3 and it's the last one. Yeah, I fully intend for it to be the last one. This thing has nothing to do with John Bell Hood. As a matter of fact, I don't even think Hood's going to make the cut on what this subject is. But I talked to Scott and I said, Confederate veterans after the war, people kissed and made up. People largely forgave. And you can read the different quotes by the commanders. I like Nathan Bedford Forrest's, his farewell address, where he urges his men, be as good as citizens as you were soldiers. And make peace. We're going to move on. We tried. It didn't work out. Let's be good Americans. Most Confederates did. They said, hey, we were Confederates once, now we're Americans again. And I thought that I'd start doing some research on what did these guys do? And, of course, back in the old days, nobody did nothing. Today, you can live an entire life and do nothing. And back in those days, if you did nothing, you didn't eat.
That's right.
And everybody gets hungry. So I researched probably, I'm guessing, because you can't keep track, anywhere between 7,000 and 9,000 little profiles or whatever I could find on Confederate soldiers. Not just the generals, all the way down to the privates. And I started keeping track of what some of them did. And it's unbelievable. I mean, what I was expecting, it was 10 times more jaw-dropping at what some of these men did and the positions that they achieved and the service that they gave to not just their state, but their country and even to the world. And today these guys are being called racists and, slave defenders and traitors and all that sort of stuff. And isn't it amazing that the people who actually shot at each other, shot cannons and muskets at each other and fought with sabers, it seems there was more forgiveness and more respect for each other, the guys that actually did it, than here we are 150 years later with people. There's no forgiveness now, it seems. So anyway, I've done this research. I've finished with the research, and I haven't really even started the book because I've been busy. So you take all the research, and I boiled all this down because you have to draw a line. I mean, so many people did so many things, and you hate to say that a successful merchant or a former soldier who founded a bank or founded a church or whatever, you hate to say, that they can't make the cut in the book. But the book would end up being thousands of pages long because everybody did something, and especially in the South where it was largely destroyed. So many soldiers did so many things for their community, but unfortunately I'm going to be limited to a couple hundred pages, and so my database, if you will, is going to be about 800 or 850 characters. But the ones I'm going to show you here are just the highlights, if you will, or things that can be easily grasped, and also things that are like I don't know why, but it's just kind of evolved over the years, right? If anybody that's involved in a university for some reason or other, if you're involved with a college or a university, you've reached the top of that particular profession or vocation. And to me, I hope there's no college teachers here. I respect college teachers, but I don't respect college teachers anymore, and I respect a junior high teacher. Teacher's a teacher. And whether you're teaching little ones or you're teaching guys with beards, you're a teacher. But you know how society is. If you're a professor so-and-so, it gives you some particular credibility or something. So anyway, these are some of the people that I just picked out because I thought they'd be interesting. And I hope you all think even if you don't think they're interesting, smile and nod and act like you do, please. Well, we're in the South, right? So anyway, let me make sure I usually give a little talk on how, hey, these guys forgave and they got along a whole lot better, and it seems like people are getting along today. And there's the golden anniversary thing. It was on 50th anniversary. It was celebrated. Sorry, I don't have a remote control here. And this one's interesting. On Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts, a former, I'm going to try not to read. You know, I don't like to be read to, and somebody's speaking, you're looking at the top of their head. And I'm just going to, I'll miss out on some specifics here, but I don't think you all will care. This is in Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. You can't get any more Yankee than that. And a former soldier, I've got their name. And by the way, when this thing is over, if I say anything that has particular interest to you, like a person, or maybe you've got somebody that lives in Martha's Vineyard, and you say, who was the guy? And I'll look it up, but I'll stick around as long as anybody wants, and I can actually give you the names of these people. Anyway, a former Confederate soldier ends up there somehow and starts a newspaper. And in, I don't know, around 1890 or whatever it is, he has gotten so much respect for former Union soldiers that live in his community that he took his own money and he erected that statue. That's a statue in Martha's Vineyard, and it's in honor of Union soldiers, and it was erected and paid for by a Confederate veteran. Well, in 1908 or something like that, the guy was still up there, getting older, and the GAR chapter, Grand Army Republic chapter, up there, got to love this guy so much and appreciated him so much that they added a monument, little monument beside the monument, and it says, well, it says, this tablet dedicated by Union veterans of the Civil War and patriotic citizens of Martha's Vineyard in honor of the Confederate soldiers. So how nice was that? But boy, you think they do something like that today? You know, and these were people who tried to kill each other, and they got along better.
Is that still standing, sir?
It's up there. Well, I mean, I haven't seen it, but it's up there. I've been to Martha's Vineyard, but I wasn't interested in this now, or I would have looked it up. And this is what's going on today. I won't leave that up there long because if that makes you all as angry and as sick as it does me. I see enough pictures of them happening all over. Okay, I have categories of what some Confederate veterans did. And I broke them down into categories. And in education, these, is that clear enough? Can people mostly read them? Anyway, founders of universities by Confederate veterans. Some of them in the South you would expect, there's others you wouldn't. Agnes Scott Women's College, Averett College, Birmingham Southern, Blue Mountain College, Clemson. They're going to have to give back their national championship trophy probably because that was founded by, I think his name was Charles or Thomas Clemson.
Thomas Green.
Thomas Green Clemson. Coker College, East Carolina. Anyway, I go on and on. We'll be here all night or all day. But anyway, and then postgraduate schools, so many medical schools and law schools. This is the one I love the most. A founder of I'm sorry, he was a president. I'll get to it here in another click. But anyway, oh, here you go. The University of California, Hastings School of Law, founded by a Confederate veteran. His name was not Hastings, but it was founded by a Confederate veteran. By the name of William Irvin. Just wait till they find out about that in Berkeley. College and university presidents, former Confederate soldiers, and another thing that was very interesting. I thought that former Confederate generals would be the ones that did the most after the war, and it's really surprising. I think most of the generals just, you know, first of all, they were a little bit older. Most of the generals, I think, just said, you know, I've given it my all. Yeah. A majority of all these things you're going to see here, these were like captains and majors and colonels. So, and a lot of enlisted men as well. But anyway, these were university presidents that I have found that were Confederate veterans. Whoops. Professors. I hope I don't mess this up. Anyway, you see your alma mater or your kids or your anybody. These teachers at these schools were Confederate veterans. And again, there's Cal Berkeley, the University. Pacific University in San Francisco. Anyway, just on and on and on. Apparently, these universities didn't have a problem with a Confederate soldier teaching. Presidents of professional national societies. The American Medical Association, a former Confederate, was president of the AMA. The American Neurological Society, the American Surgical Association, American Psychiatric Association, American Bar Association. We won't hold that against him. I've got a son that's a lawyer, and we call him the black sheep of the family. Anyway, and these others, and National Association for the Advancement of Science, and former Confederate veterans. And this is the one I like. Hey, that's how I want to look when I grow up. I mean, that guy looks smart. He looks like a couple of guys in here. There's his brother right there. Give us a. This is Joseph LeConte. Now, he was with the Confederate government. His rank was a lieutenant, and he was what they call it, mining in niter. Anyway, it was for gunpowder and things. But anyway, he ended up quite the guy after the war, and among many things that he did was he was a founder of the Sierra Club. There is a mountain named after him in the Smokies. Somewhere, I don't know if it's in western North Carolina, or if it's on the Tennessee side, or where it is. There's also the LeConte Lodge in Yellowstone National Park. Wait till they find out. And this is the truth. I told you all this is the second presentation I've given of this. The other one was in Annapolis, Maryland last month. And when it's over, and there were a couple of people there that I don't know why they were even involved in a Civil War history organization, because there were a couple of them that were all for taking down Confederate monuments and all that stuff. It's a different program. Anyway, when it's over, one of the two guys comes up, and we're milling around afterwards, and he says to me, he says, "Are you familiar with the LeConte sparrow?" I said, "No, I can't say that I am." He says, "Well, I'm a," whatever the fancy word is for a bird watcher. He says, "I'm a bird watcher. And there is a sparrow, or maybe a wren or something. There's some bird named the LeConte something or other. Do you think that was named after him?" I said, "Well, I don't know. Maybe, probably." He says, "I hope not." And he was dead serious. I mean, he's take this stuff way too serious.
You didn't laugh at it, did you?
No, because, you know, they were my hosts. But I ended up telling everybody afterwards, that's for sure. But anyway, that interesting one. Simon Baruch. This is fascinating. Simon Baruch was a Jewish Confederate, and he moved around, but when the Civil War broke out, he lived in Mississippi, and he became the surgeon for the 13th Mississippi. And Dr. Baruch, I want to find his, as best I can, I want to find his, all the stuff that he was involved in. But Simon Baruch stayed behind at Gettysburg and to care for the wounded, and he was captured, and then he was paroled. And here's Dr. Baruch. Again, wait till they find out about this in New York. They're going to have to spend a fortune changing the names of buildings. Simon Baruch, Jewish Confederate surgeon, 13th Mississippi Infantry, and the 3rd South Carolina Infantry of the Gettysburg thing. After the war, Baruch practiced medicine in South Carolina and volunteered his services for 1 year in the slums of New York City. He returned to South Carolina. He practiced for 16 years, and in 1881 moved to New York, where he practiced medicine and became an outspoken proponent of public health and hygiene. Simon Baruch is the namesake of civil monuments, educational entities, and academic departments in New York City and throughout the country, including various Simon Baruch houses, which are like public housing things, a public housing complex in Manhattan, as well as buildings, halls, and academic chairs at Columbia University, Clemson, New York University College of Medicine, the Medical College of Virginia, Virginia's Commonwealth University. New York City Department of Education's middle school, number 104, is named the Simon Baruch Middle School, along with an adjacent Simon Baruch playground and garden, all named after a Confederate veteran. Yes.
Two things. It's Baruch.
Baruch.
And he was one of the founders of the UCV camp in New York City.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said Baruch the first time, and I thought it's Baruch, and I thought I stuck with it, and I shouldn't have done that. Shouldn't have done that. And Bernard Baruch is a legendary Wall Streeter, and he ended up founding things in his father's name. It just went on and on. In the South Carolina Business Hall of Fame, as recently as 1986, Ambrosio Gonzalez, and in both of these were in 1986, and James Coker College. And the company that he founded, Sunoco, not with a U, but S-O-N-O-C-O, is founder of Sunoco or Sunoco, a products company who has 20,000 employees, founded by I think he was a sergeant. James Coker, Confederate veteran. David Yulee. You go into Florida, when you're on your way to Florida and you go down 95, I think the first town after you cross into is Yulee, Florida, a little town there, named after David Yulee. David Yulee was another Jewish Confederate, and he was a senator from Florida. And Florida has a thing called Floridian of the Year. It's kind of like a Hall of Fame sort of thing. David Yulee is in it, or at least for the time being. Maybe I shouldn't publish my book. And Francis Dancy, I haven't found a picture of him yet, but that's his grave. And he invented some strain of the tangerine. And he is in the Florida Citrus Hall of Fame. Amory Coffin. Rather grim sounding name. My name's Hood. I should say something about that. Amory Coffin was an engineer and an architect. And among the things that he was involved in the design and construction of was the original Madison Square Garden, the Crocker Building in San Francisco, the Provident Life and Trust Company building in Philadelphia, and the New York Stock Exchange. Former Confederate veteran. He was Sergeant Major in Parker's South Carolina Artillery. Samuel Lockett. He was a colonel, chief engineer, Department of Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. First president of Calhoun College, which is now Jacksonville State University. But anyway, he designed the base of the Statue of Liberty. So I guess they're going to put one of those black tarps around it. Designed the base of the Statue of Liberty. This one's interesting. I'm surprised they even allow pictures of Douglas MacArthur using evil tobacco, but there he is. Arthur MacArthur was captain, major, whatever, of, I think, the 24th Wisconsin, which fought in Georgia and the Tennessee campaign. Arthur MacArthur's regiment was a part of Updike's brigade at the Battle of Franklin, where they plugged the hole at the Carter House and saved Schofield's army. Well, anyway, the chief surgeon of Frank Cheatham's corps was Augustus Braysacher. And what is ironic about this is that in 1880, Arthur MacArthur was in the U.S. Army and he was stationed at Little Rock Barracks in Little Rock, Arkansas. And his wife gave birth. And the obstetrician who delivered him was Dr. Braysacher, who was a surgeon in Cheatham's corps at the Battle of Franklin, where he got seriously wounded. So Douglas MacArthur was delivered by a doctor who was a former Confederate soldier. This one is fascinating. I didn't know this, and it happened in the Union Army and the Confederate Army. They would hire physicians who would be regimental surgeons. So there could be a regimental surgeon, and they're not really in the Army. They were contracted as a civilian contractor. Well, Dr. Albert Freeman Africanus King, which that's a name that should go with LeConte's face. Anyway, he was a contract surgeon for the 15th Alabama. And when his contract was up near the end of the war, he packed up, he went to Washington, D.C., and then he was hired by the U.S. Army to be a surgeon in a Union Army hospital in Washington, D.C. He happened to be at Ford's Theater the night that Abraham Lincoln was shot, and Dr. King, formerly of the 16th Alabama, was one of the 3 doctors who took immediate care of Abraham Lincoln and took him across the street to the boarding house.
Good job.
I don't know if the malpractice is happening. Has that statute expired yet? But no, seriously, somebody who 3 months earlier had been the regimental surgeon of the 16th Alabama is caring for Lincoln. Public service. A former Confederate soldier later became chief of the Choctaw Indian Nation. He fought obviously for Stan Wadey and in the Trans-Mississippi. Charles Turner became Adjutant General of the state of Montana. You'll see a few things here. You know, nothing surprised me when I saw former Confederates that became elected officials or public officials in the former 11 or 14. I'm a member of the John C. Breckinridge camp in Lexington, Kentucky, and they do not use 11 Confederate states. They say 14 because they're from Kentucky. But the 11 states that seceded. I wasn't surprised at that, but you'll see some figures here that in non-Confederate states where they apparently had no problem with the fact that the guy was a Confederate veteran. Charles Turner, Adjutant General of, of Montana. Samuel Shannon became Secretary of State of the state of Wyoming. And by the way, I'm saying states, some of these were territories at the time, but just to keep it simple, states. Samuel Shannon was reputed to be quite the ladies' man. He is a handsome devil. The city of Naples, Florida, was founded by General John Stuart, who was not reputed to be a ladies' man. One of these days I'm going to be giving a talk, and probably, you know, like the great-great-grandson or something. But anyway, that just catches my eye after Samuel Shannon. But anyway, founder of Naples, Florida. And he was from Kentucky. He was a cavalry commander. And anyway, a lot of people think Fort Myers, Florida was founded by Colonel Abraham Myers, right? Quartermaster General of the Confederacy. It was not. He wasn't. It was named after him by whoever founded it. So there's Fort Myers, Florida, which is, you know, Naples, Fort Myers, that's that whole area. But Naples was founded by General Stuart.
Does that mean that if they were in a territory, they were appointed and elected?
Yes. Yep. Now we get into former mayors. Now they were all over the place down here, but I was very surprised to find a former Confederate soldier was a mayor of Ogden, Utah. A former Confederate soldier became mayor of Minneapolis. And the one I like the most, they will end up having to do counseling in this city when they find out, is Cameron Tom, former mayor of Los Angeles. And ironically, his rank was major. So if you want to say ground control to Major Tom. Sorry about that. But anyway, 1900 to 1902 or 1904, Cameron Tom, mayor of LA, Confederate soldier. State and territory governors, thank you for the comment. He says territories being appointed. Some of these don't surprise you. But then you get out, there's Oklahoma, Utah, West Virginia, which is really weird because we seceded from Virginia. And I always ask people, if secession was illegal, why in the world did West Virginia allow to secede from Virginia? And usually people, the northern people, say, I don't want to talk about that. Right. New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona, Alaska, believe it or not. And I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but there was a very limited federal presence in Alaska in the late 1800s and early 1900s. The Commerce Department had a facility in Alaska, having something to do with making sure that Russians weren't fishing in the water, some of the same things. Whoever was the highest rank, whoever was in command of the Commerce Department's facility in Juneau or wherever it is, was the de facto, it was the highest authority in Alaska. So if there was any decision to be made that had to be made on the spot, it was made by a guy who was a Confederate veteran. Again, I don't have time for the names and all that. Okay, Confederates served in the Spanish-American War. A lot of people already know about these. Fitzhugh Lee, Joe Wheeler, Thomas Rosser, and Matt Butler. All of them cavalry. The only one who actually saw combat was Joe Wheeler. The other three were activated, but the war only lasted 10 days, and they were active duty and were ready for duty, but they did not see combat. There were also several other former Confederates that were commanders of Union or of American U.S. Army units, but they weren't even activated, but they would have been. And Here's a picture of Joe Wheeler, and those are the Rough Riders. Notice the guy on the right might look familiar. It's Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah, Whaler was a general and he was a colonel under Whaler. You
Yeah.
never hear that.
That's right. That's right. Yep. Now this is another one. If former Confederates, if they were traitors, right, that just got off, if you read stuff today, they were all traitors. The United States government, 5 or 6 presidents, I've got it here, but I don't want to take time to read. You take somebody, back in these days, when it took you weeks and weeks to go to other parts of the world, if you didn't trust somebody, if you didn't think that somebody was going to have the best interests of the United States of America in mind, why would you have them be the representative of your government before the telephone or the, or transatlantic telegraph? But Grover Cleveland and other former presidents assigned ambassadors. They were called different things, ministers, ambassadors to these countries. Down there at the bottom, those are consuls down there, consulate offices. But anyway, former Confederates were ambassadors to these countries, ambassadors from the United States. Secretary of the United States Navy, 2 former Confederate soldiers. This one surprised me about as much as anything. To put former Confederate soldiers in charge of the United States Navy. Not just 1, but 2.
About what year was that?
The question was, while I thumbed through papers,
That,
no, I was wondering it myself. Oh, here we go. Hillary Abner Herbert, Colonel, 8th Alabama, United States House of Representatives from Atlanta, U.S. Secretary of the Navy, 1893 to 1897. That's Herbert. William Henry Hunt, Colonel, 1st Louisiana Militia, blah, 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 United States. I don't have the date on that.
but after 1890, about.
Yeah. And then Hunt was also U.S. Ambassador to Russia. Panama Canal Commission, Benjamin Harrod. Harrod was, he was an engineer. He was, I think he was a graduate of Harvard. There's a book called The Crimson Confederates. And there was over 200 and some Harvard graduates that fought for the Confederacy. And there's also a book called Yale's Confederates, of which there were a couple of hundred Yaleys too. So anyway, David Key, Postmaster General of the United States. He was also like a grandson or maybe a nephew or something of Francis Scott Key. One of the greatest names in Civil War history, Lucius Quintus Cincinnatus Lamar. And he was Secretary of the Interior of the United States. He's from Mississippi. Solicitor General John Good. Solicitor General is one of those positions that doesn't sound, it sounds like he's a salesman, but the Solicitor General represents the United States government in arguments before the Supreme Court. So Solicitor General is a pretty darned important position. He's he's a United States lawyer on Supreme Court cases. And he was a private in the 2nd Virginia Cavalry under Jubal Early. 2 U.S. Attorney Generals. Amos Ackerman, he was major on the staff of a name familiar to you all, General Robert Toombs. And Augustus Hill Garland. He was not a Confederate soldier, but he was a Confederate senator from Arkansas. So, but he a former Confederate. He was also U.S. Attorney General. Supreme Court. I had no clue on this. Horace Lurton, All right, I've got Hal Edmonds Jackson. That was Red Jackson's brother. He was a Confederate civil authority. He was not actually a soldier per se, not a combat soldier. Lucius Quintus Cincinnatus Lamar, who was also Secretary of the Interior, was also in the Supreme Court. He was, like I said, was from Mississippi. He 19th Mississippi Infantry. He raised it and was the commander for a while. Horace Lurton. He was a sergeant major. Had served in the 5th Tennessee Infantry, 2nd Kentucky Infantry, and 3rd Kentucky Cavalry. Twice captured, once released, and he survived the war at Johnson's Island in Lake Erie. Anyway, an Associate Supreme Court Justice. And the last one,
Excuse me.
Douglas White, Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, a former Confederate soldier. He was a lieutenant in the 9th Louisiana Cavalry.
Just want to mention, Lamar was born about a 20-minute drive from here.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought he was from Alabama or Georgia, and then was in Mississippi. You know what I like about this? You look at that picture and you just think that some guy say, "You in a heap of trouble, boy." Right? He's Smokey and the Bandit, or that's Boss Hog, or something. That's me looking judge. I'm guilty. Anyway, this is the last of them, and anyway, we got to let people know when the war was over, it was over. And the Confederate soldiers, for the most part, became as patriotic Americans as they were patriotic soldiers. And, oh, I'm sorry, I had a couple other funny ones. The knuckle railroad coupler, you know, that you see nowadays, it's been used forever, was invented by a Confederate veteran. Probably saved tens of thousands of lives all over the world because they used to couple and uncouple like that fella down there. But anyway, I'm sorry, Eli Hamilton Janney invented the railroad coupler. This guy claims to have flown before the Wright brothers. But there's an old saying in historians that says extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. So, but they did name, he was from some town in northern Alabama. They actually, I forget the town. They named it Boswell Field. But anyway, he does have 2 or 3 patents on steering mechanisms for dirigibles.
Oh.
So, steering of blimps. He had patents. Everybody knows about the inventor of Coca-Cola, right? Former Confederate. This one was funny. Yes, sir.
He was not from Atlanta, Georgia. He was from Columbus.
Well, I probably got it right here, but he was from Georgia. And this one was funny. When I was up in Annapolis, I was there the week before Christmas. And I told him, if you sing Jingle Bells, you might be a traitor. Because Jingle Bells. That's John Pierpont. He was a captain in the 5th Georgia, I think, from down around Savannah. So don't sing Jingle Bells, or you are politically incorrect.
Formerly from New England.
Right.
Yeah, like a lot of them were. So like I said, we're all American. They all became Americans, and we're all Americans now. We started it with the Pledge of Allegiance. So Confederates once, Americans twice. And I'm hoping what we can do is we can take this sort of information and tell the people that are out there having their meltdowns over statues and memorials and all that these people, they did good after the war.
Publish your book.
I'm trying. I'm trying. But anyway, I know there's other things going on, so what I'll do is, and I always end my programs by saying I'll hang out in the parking lot until the last question is asked. So anyway, I appreciate it. I didn't see anybody going to sleep, and I got the southern hospitality that I was fully expecting, and I appreciate it. Thank you, Sam. That was awesome. That's very cool. At this time, we will have a brief adjournment, and again, I want to invite everybody, if you would, let's let our soldier detail go first. And gentlemen, if y'all would like to go out, I'm going to ask Commander Scott Brown from the Old Capitol Camp. And by the way, Scott, stand up. Stand up real quick. I want to recognize and let y'all say thank you to Commander Scott here, our host today in Millersville. He did all of this, made all these arrangements. Let's say thank you to Scott. Along with a lot of members of this camp who are here, and I can't spot everybody. Glenn, you have a question?
Yes. For the speaker and for everyone really, a few months back our national magazine had a letter from a member about a book that had been written in 2005. At first I ever heard about it, and probably virtually everybody never heard about it. Written by 3 reporters in Connecticut, in that newspaper there that's the oldest of all the active newspapers. The book is called Complicity, how the North, I don't remember all the title, I'm older than I look, my memory's fading fast. How North supported, made the most money from, and the whole 9 yards of slavery. And there were plantations in Connecticut also with slaves.
Yes.
And that is big. And there's big information that should have as much dissemination as we could provide anywhere in these days that we're under attack, and he described it well.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the most interesting speeches I have ever heard.
Thank you. Thank you. So again, at this time, we're going to ask our soldiers if they will like to go ahead and come out first. We're going to go across the street. Scott,